Okay, so I'm going to do a very brief summary of what we've done in the last 3 weeks, and then we're going to move on to something quite different, okay? We've been talking about kings, and we saw there are advantages to having a king. There can be very good things about having a king. They're good, and actually it's a quality to any good leader. We looked at David's ability to give us a vision of who we are, who we can be, and so enable us to be, as a people, be true to ourselves as the representative of Hashem in the world. We saw with Shlomo, Shlomo's Lev Shomea is what he asked for, the ability to listen and to judge empathetically and with justice and righteousness. That was the ideal of what a king should be doing. And those things are wonderful, but there are risks, and that's what we looked at last week, the risks of having a king. The Torah tries to curb or to rein in these risks. Don't have too many wives, money, horses, etc., and particularly not for himself. And we also looked at Shmuel's warning, because a king will use the power, will use and abuse the power of the government. And we saw last week the extent to which Shlomo succumbed to all these risks. And so it's a balance of the honor that due to a king and his humility, both as a king and as a person, and the balance between statesmanship and being on the world stage, and between that and our unique mission. So that's what we've been doing so far for 3 weeks. Today, I want to do something completely different, which is not look at a king, but look at a Navi. So I wanted to look at 2 stories about Elisha, which we read as the Haftarah for Parshat Vayera, and it's obvious why. When we look at it, we'll see. But it's very parallel. So this is the second book of Malachim, of Kings, chapter 4. So the first story is shorter, and I think what I want to do with this story is just read it through and then go back and reflect on it. So I'm going to read it in the Hebrew and translate it, if that's okay with everybody. Okay. Isha achat min neshei b'nei hanavim tza'aka el Elisha. So a woman who was a wife among the B'nei Nevi'im, the band of prophet disciples. It's like prophet school. These are disciples who grew up around a Navi, and these are now Elisha's supporters and disciples. So this woman, Aka el Elisha, she cries out to Elisha saying, Avdecha ishi mate, your servant, my husband, died. V'ata yadata ki avdecha haya yirei et Hashem. And you know that your servant, meaning her husband, was yirei et Hashem. He was God-fearing. And now the creditor is coming to take my 2 sons. Hang on to that, Ben, I'll get there. To take my 2 sons for slaves. So we didn't know yet when she mentioned her son that for her husband that he died with debts, but he died with debts, and the creditors are coming, and because she can't repay it, the creditor is about to take the kids. V'yomer eleha Elisha, and Elisha says to her, Ma'aseh lach, hagidi li ma yesh lach b'bayit. What can I do for you? What do you have? Tell me what you have in your house. V'tomer, ein l'shivtecha kol b'bayit ki'im asuch shemen. Your servant, meaning me, I don't have anything in my house except a little bottle of oil. And the Meforshim tell us it's like not just a little bottle of oil, but like drops of oil. And this is like enough oil for anointing barely anything, and barely enough to spread on something, but she doesn't even have the something to spread the oil on. That's all she has left. V'yomer, l'chi sha'ali lach kelim min hachutz me'et kol shchenayach. Go out and ask for kelim rikim al timiti, for vessels, for containers from your neighbors. As many as you can, empty vessels. Get as many as you can. Don't be hesitant. But and go back, close your door. Close the door on you and your sons. And the little bottle of oil you have, pour from it into all the empty vessels that you've got. So she goes from him, but he scored hadelet ba'ada, and she closes the door behind her, and she closes the door behind her on her and her kids. And so they bring the vessels to her, and she pours. So it's like this little tiny bottle that was hers now becomes a fountain. And the kids bring, and it pours from this like little bottle. And when the containers were full, she said, V'tomer el bana, she said to her son, Hikisha elai od, Kelly, bring me another. V'yomer eleha ein od, and he said, there's no more. Ein od, Kelly, there's not another one. V'yamod Hashem. And with that word, the oil stopped producing. V'tavo v'teged le'isha Elokim, she comes and she reports to the man of God. V'yomer, and he says, L'chi michri et Hashem, go sell the oil. V'shalmi et nishiech, go pay off your debts, and pay your creditor. V'at b'nayich tichi b'notar, and you and your sons will live on the remainder. So that's the story. So it's a wonderful little miracle story. Miracles are sort of a hallmark of Elisha. It's not a big major on Har Carmel in front of the whole people like his teacher Eliyahu, but nevertheless, it's like he goes around and he performs little miracles while he's in community for the people he relates to. As Alex Israel says, it's like he performs a miracle automatically, almost nonchalantly. It's part of who he is. So this is an instance. So it's a beautiful little story, but there's a whole lot more to it, and we need to fill in a bunch of the details. So first of all, who is this destitute woman in a community of prophet disciples? And we can figure out without too much trouble who her husband is. Her husband is Ovadiah. We know it's Ovadiah because she describes him as, she says, you know, my husband is, that's the wrong page, I haven't quoted exactly, Yirei et Elohim, Yirei et Hashem. That's an expression that's used very rarely, I think 4 times. And the first time about Abraham, and then about Ovadiah. So Ovadiah was King Ahab's right-hand man. Ahab was one of the paradigmatic bad kings of Israel. That's a whole story I won't go into. He was married to Jezebel. And just we know there are associations with that name. Jezebel persecuted prophets. She killed off all the prophets, God's prophets. And Ovadiah, even though he was that close to the king, was able to hide, or possibly because, which makes you wonder about Ahab, but that's another story. He was able to hide 100 prophets 50 to a cave, which means that he had to then support 100 prophets. And apparently, we know now that he managed to support those 100 prophets at the risk of his own livelihood, so much so that he went into debt. And even though you're not supposed to either lend at interest or borrow at interest, he nonetheless borrowed at interest because it was a matter of life and death for the prophets that he was supporting. So that's like the backstory. We also can figure out who the creditor is, because nobody has the power to come and seize children instead of a debt except the king. And so the king is Ahab's son. So that's, now we have this backstory of, we know who the father was, who has passed away, leaving his wife with a terrible debt, the king who is about to come and reclaim the children. So we have the sense of the political situation. And what do we know about the wife? We have a sense that she never came to Elisha before. She never came to cry for him for help, and she's down to her last drop of oil. So she didn't come crying to Elisha when she was in begging for food, but only when she's about to lose her children. And we have this sense of she supported her husband in everything he did. There was no protest against even the debt that he left her with. In fact, Chazal quote a midrash that the previous chapter ended with a king of Moab sacrificing a son. It's a very complicated story, but the end of which is it results in a ketzef, an anger of Hashem at B'nei Yisrael. But we don't see any result to this anger. And so the Midrash said that there is no result to this anger because in the merit of this woman, who could have been distraught with her husband for spending all their money and more to support prophets, and yet she supported him. And so because there was no ketzef on her part, it canceled out God's ketzef at the people. You see the sort of linguistic connections? Okay. But now, when she's about to lose her children because of the good that her husband did and she supported for God's prophets, she comes to Elisha and says, I have a problem now. How can this be? How can I now be losing my children? In other words, her problem is a theological problem. It's a problem of theodicy. And that's why she comes to Elisha now, not just, I need help. So the other thing we have to ask is, why does he react in the way he does? Why does he react with the miracle that he makes, and why does he do it in the way that he does? So we have to go back and look at what he does. Some of the elements of the way he performs the nace are sort of, there are characteristics to how one goes about performing a miracle. The idea that the woman had to do something. The person for whom a miracle is being done has to do something, has to participate in some way. It's not surprising that he told her to close the doors. Rashi explains that there's like a seriousness to a miracle being performed that you need to preserve. It's like to preserve the holiness of it. And also, miracles don't come from nothing. There has to be a natural element that it grows out of. There's a nace connects to the natural physical world.
And even more interesting, he doesn't do anything himself at all.
Right. He directs it from afar, which is...
He's not even involved.
Except that he orchestrates it. It's like he's the conductor from a distance.
Yeah, he doesn't go there. He doesn't do any action.
Right.
He just gives her the instructions, and she does it herself with God.
Right. Right. She does it herself, but not just she does it. She also has to... there's an interesting piece to that which connects to the next story, which I haven't quite figured out. But yeah, he sends her off, and he sends her off to do this by sending her to her neighbors, which is, I think, a really crucial part. He sends her to her neighbors. So he could have reacted by taking up a collection. You have a problem, you have to pay your debt, let's get you the money to pay your debt. But that isn't what he does, because he has to meet her theological problem too, but he has to meet her debt problem in a particular way. So he sends her to her neighbors, but not to beg for aid, but just to borrow empty vessels that she's going to return to them. But in the process, he's connecting her to her neighbors in a way that she should have been but wasn't. She's living in the community of the B'nei Yisrael, these prophet disciples who, in a sense, exist only because of the work of her and her husband. And yet she's destitute and nothing is being done for her. So it's this connecting her, his plan of connecting her to her neighbors is really essential. So she goes, the containers fill up, she has the oil, she goes and she reports back to him, which is interesting too. Because she can't just go use the oil, she needs to go as a way of reporting to him, thanking him. There's one interpretation, can she even use this oil? Is it too miraculous to be used for normal purposes? So he can instruct her, yeah, now sell it, pay off your debt, and live off the rest. So there's a sense in which it's a kind of nida keneged nida. That now the money that she's now living off of was provided to her by God, just as the reason for her debt was used to provide food for God's other prophets. So it's a beautiful kind of full circle that he creates and sends her off to do. And it shows compassion, his involvement in the community, so he understands what's at stake. He sees what she's asking, and his wisdom in crafting this miracle, which, granted, is a little miracle. It's not a show on Mount Carmel, but is a little miracle that heals a community and a woman's family. So it's
specifically done in private.
Yeah, right.
Which is not true of all the miracles that Elisha performs. He's happy to do a community-solving miracle out in public, but here he's preserving the woman's dignity in private,
right,
by having her miracle happen in private. But it's also this: if you're gonna match it up with the cause, the work of the husband, the prophet the Obadiah who sustained the other prophets, was also done in secrecy.
Right.
So that the secret cause gets a secret solution.
Right. It really, all the pieces fit together really perfectly. He does what is appropriate to the circumstances, which is really kind of wonderful. Okay, so that's story number one. And this sets us up in a way, in what will be an interesting way for story number two. Story number two is different than this. So there are a number of like short little miracle vignettes about Alicia. This is way longer. It's a whole little literary masterpiece. And so what I want to do is analyze it as we read through it. I could probably take 2 hours to do this. I will try not to. The structure of it is quite wonderful. There are 5 coherent acts, each introduced by either a time signature or a change in place. There's an internal structure that is mirrored in each section, and the 2 acts in each act, 2 actions in each act, and the literary devices support the thematic point. It's really wonderful. And it's the reason why this is the Haftarah for this Parsha is it's the obvious choice. The parallels are wonderful and striking. Does everybody know the story? Because I don't want to ruin any spoilers. Should I assume you know how it ends? Okay, good. All right, so the parallel to the Parsha is clear. The language is very parallel, especially to what will be the birth announcements. That's most striking, but there's a lot of parallel language, and then of course the ending, the almost loss of a son, the Akedah with Yitzhak, and the death and revival with this woman's children. The other thing is, following the story we just read, we're sort of set up for another wonderful miracle story. We've just seen the power that Alicia has to work miracles and how thoughtful he is. So we're expecting a wonderful miracle story. But there's a whole lot more going on in the story. So we'll see. The other thing is, it's not a typical barren woman story, because we don't find out till we're well into the story that she doesn't have children, which is not typical. And in fact, it's a device of this story that you only learn what you need to know when you need to know it. That will be important. Okay, so we are on verse 8. Vayhi hayom, and it was on one day, v'yavor Elisha el Shunam. Elisha was traveling to Shunam. Elisha travels. So that's interesting. I think we mentioned last week, maybe, Shlomo traveled a lot. That was how he went about being a judge. It seems like Elisha is doing something very similar. So he went to Shunam. V'sham isha gedola. There was an important woman there. I'll get back to in what way she was important. V'techazek bo, and she entreated him. Lecho lechem. I mean, it's a very physical term. But verbally, so she entreated him to come and I'll feed you. So we can imagine the hospitality, much as Abraham and Sarah. Vayhi midei avro, and whenever he would come, yasor shama lechol lechem. He would stop and he would eat by her house. In this one verse, this verse establishes a lot. We know that Elisha travels, and we learn a lot about her. She's Isha Gedolah, that it has, she's prominent in her community. So she has standing sort of with wealth. But we also see that she goes out of her way to perform chesed. She sought him out and entreated him until he agreed to come. So she's Isha Gedolah, both in wealth and standing, but also in chesed. And so we now know something about her and her character, and also about Elisha's habit. So one pasuk, that's a lot of information. Okay. All right. So Vatoma Elisha, and so now she says to her husband, Hinena Yadati, I'm going to hold off translating the Hinena. I know, he Ish Elohim Kodeshu, he is a holy, a man of God, a holy man of God, Over Aleinu Tamid. He comes by here regularly. And Over Aleinu is that phrase is reminiscent. It echoes the angels who Over al Avraham, who come to Avraham right before the birth announcement. So that's a lovely allusion. Na'asena aliyat kir katana. Let's make a little room. The Gemara has a whole debate about what this room looks like, but a little room. V'nasim lo sham mita v'shulchan v'kisei u'menorah. And we'll put there the essentials: a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp. V'haya b'vo'o aleinu. And whenever he comes to us, yasor sham. He can turn in there. So now I'm going to go back to the Hinena Yadati. There are number of ways you can read this as now I know, meaning he's been coming to us a lot, and the more we see him, the more I know he is an Ish Elohim Kodeshu. He is a holy man of God, and now I've learned. Ralbag explains it as she was so used to inviting company, he was new in town, so she pressed him to come, but now that he's been coming, she recognizes his status as a Navi, as an Ish Elohim. The Gemara explains that she knows, she really understands how holy he is from what she's learned as his landlady, and from various things. Rashi cites one, no flies at his table, at his food, because he's too holy for flies. But Radak says, no, she knew that all along. She knew to approach him. She probably has other company too, but the phrase doesn't necessarily mean that. Lot uses the same phrase when he says, oh, there are cities here. It's not like he just discovered the geography. So it doesn't necessarily mean that. In the very next pasuk, she says, na senna. There's no force to that na that necessitates us in saying that she's gaining knowledge here. So, I mean, I sort of like the reading that she knew all along. She had this understanding to begin with, but you can, so I don't know, you can take it either way, but you can imagine that it only grows. So whether or not she was a follower of his to begin with, she certainly is now. Okay. So that was Act 1. So now we have all our sort of ground rules established. All right. Vahi hayom. And so one day, this is the time signature to know which fit of a new act. Vayavo shama. He comes there. Vayasur el aliyah v'yishkav sham. And he goes into his room and he lay down. V'yoma el Gehazi na'aro. And he says to his attendant, Gehazi, he has an attendant. We didn't know that before. But apparently that's been true all along. Interesting. Okay. Now we have a minor character. Hi, Sharon.
Sorry.
No problem. We're in the middle of the second story, chapter 4. I'm in verse 12.
Okay.
Whenever you have a minor character introduced like this, it's always a good idea to think, what is the role of this minor character? Could we envision the story without him? What role does he play? So whether or not I'm a little unsure what your message just meant, Ben. So the role of the minor character is something we will need to be aware of.
Yeah, he introduces the hine na yadati.
Right. Okay, that's right. Abraham says that to Sarah, hine na yadati. So that you have to ask that there because it's very confusing. They're on their way to Egypt, and he says to her, hine na yadati. Now I know that you're beautiful. Had he never known this before? Maybe,
So
or maybe
it's
it's
really
relevant
hard
now in a way it
to
wasn't
be hard
before.
pressed to try to make that interpretation, as opposed to, now, honey, I know you're really beautiful, so
Yeah, right. It's
you gotta put the
relevant
now
now.
in a different place. Different
We need to discuss this because we're on our way to Egypt, and they're going to know also.
Right. It's gonna matter now.
Yeah,
That's what I think. That's what Rashi says there. It has come time to pay attention to the matter.
right. Yeah. Right. Okay. All right. I should have picked that up. I mean, I knew that but I should have realized that's why you were saying it. Okay. So he says to Gehazi, his servant, Kra l'shunamit hazot, call the woman. V'yikralo, so Gehazi calls her. So he has a servant, and this is what an attendant does for a Nazi. He calls her v'ta'amod lefanav, and she stands before him. So this is ambiguous. She stands before whom? Is she standing before Elisha or before Gehazi? And the simplest grammatical way of reading it is she's standing before Gehazi. So I have this discussion out of Oriel Simon in a book called Reading Prophetic Narratives, has a whole chapter on this. He says that Abarbanel says that clearly this means she's standing before Gehazi, but Abarbanel's not satisfied with that answer because that's a little strange. So he has to explain it. And Abarbanel says that Elisha is a little hesitant to address her directly because she's a woman. And Simon says that's a little strange also. And the way Simon reads it, which I find way more satisfying, is the point is the ta'amod lefanav. So Gehazi calls her, and so she comes to Gehazi, and the point is that she stands before Gehazi. That she's going to stand before Elisha because he's the Nazi. Gehazi is just the attendant. She could sit with him, but she doesn't. That displays so much the more so her humility. That even to the attendants of the Nazi, she stands. Okay. The Yomer Lo, so he says to him, meaning Elisha's still speaking to his attendant, Amarna Eleha, say to her, Hine haradet elenu et kol harada hazot. You've gone to all this trouble. You've troubled all this trouble for us. And notice, by the way, the us. So clearly she's put out a lot of effort to feed Gehazi as well. You made all this effort for us. Ma la'asot lach. What can be done for you? Yesh ledaber lach el hamelech o el sar hatzava. Can we talk to the king? Can we talk to the head of the army? V'tomer b'toch mi anochi yoshevet. And all she says is, no, she doesn't say no, I'm sorry. All she says is, b'toch ami anochi yoshevet. I live among my people. I'm part of a community. I don't need you to speak to the king. But she doesn't answer the first part of what can be done for you. And I think the sense is, chesed is chesed. Chesed is not what you do for a quid pro quo. She's not expecting anything. She doesn't want anything. But it seems as if Elisha doesn't pick up on that part of the response. Because he goes right on. Vayomer krala. So he says to Gehazi, call her. So clearly she left after the last exchange. V'yikrala, he calls her, v'tamod b'petach, and she stands in the doorway. Vayomer, oh, I'm sorry, I missed a line. An important line. Vayomer, malas la'asot la. Elisha and Gehazi have a conversation without her, obviously. Elisha says to Gehazi, Melas, what can we do for her? V'yomer Gehazi says, Aval ben ein la. She doesn't have a son. V'isha zakein, and her husband is old. So this is a clear allusion to Abraham, the Isha zakein. And it's Gehazi who knows that she doesn't have a son. Elisha hasn't picked up on that. So, I mean, we also have a sense with the Aliyat Kir, the little room that she's built for him, the kind of sneakishness, I guess, with which she clearly built it in a way that the neighbors would never suspect that they were interacting, that he was coming and going in her house in any kind of inappropriate way. And we see that clearly here. He has no sense that there's no children in the house. And so Gehazi says, Elisha says, what do we do? And Gehazi said, she has no children. It's clear what he's saying Elisha should do. And it's also clear that Gehazi just knows. All he has to do is say this, and it's clear to him that Elisha can perform a miracle and she'll have a child. That's not beyond his master. And it's not Elisha's idea, but he jumps to it. Vayomer krala, call her, v'krala, v'tamod b'petach, and she stands in the door. Vayomer, so Elisha says, l'moed hazeh ke'eit chaya at chaveket ben. So l'moed hazeh ke'eit chaya is this phrase from the Parsha. You will be embracing a son. V'tomer, and she says, Al Adoni Isha Elokim, no, my Lord, man of God, Al Techazev B'shivtecha. Don't mislead. Don't raise false hopes in your servant. In some ways, this is reminiscent of Sarah, but it's a little different. It's not quite, such a thing could never happen, or just amazement that such a thing is going to happen. And I don't think that it's Isha Elokim could never do this, and maybe it's he might be able to do this, but I'm not Sarah, and maybe that's why this won't happen. There's a sense of there's a sense of doubt here. I want to hold off on reading the Rashi for just a bit. Okay. Okay. There's something about her hesitation. But nonetheless, v'tachar isha v'teled ben l'moed hazeh ke'et chaya asher diber. So the woman conceived and bears a son. L'moed hazeh ke'et chaya asher diber. This is exactly the language surrounding Yitzchak's birth. Asher diber eleha Elisha. So this is the fulfillment. I'll get to the difference in a minute. This is a fulfillment. And if this were the end of the story, and it paralleled the last story we read, then if this paralleled the last story, this would be the end. Everybody would be happy. We could all go home and celebrate. But this isn't the end. And so the way this is organized is there's clearly two halves. The birth of the child is the end of the first half, and that's the shorter half. The next half is coming, and the next half will be reversals and change. What we've seen so far is Elisha seems to be the strong personality, the leader. It sort of revolves around him. He's the actor. She shows humility. She shows deference. We'll see in the second half that this changes. The action changes, and the characters change. She becomes the strong actor. But I think the seeds are already laid in the first half, in the sense that everything that she's done so far succeeds. And Elisha, although we see him as successful, as important, as the holy man of God, when he wanted to help, he didn't know what to do. And I think the turning point becomes evident with the next to last, the almost end, with the last words, Eit haya asher diber eleha Elisha. It comes true as Elisha said. This is the difference between Yitzchak's birth and her child's birth. There it was, Asher diber ito Elohim, as God said it would happen. Here it's as Elisha said it would happen. So when, as we're about to see, the child dies, the reader has been so impressed all along about the parallels with Yitzchak that when things go wrong, it's a surprise to the reader. It's a wonderful literary device, but it's not a surprise to her because she's already shown something's wrong. There's something wrong with the way things are being done. And that's the force of her al techazev. What Rashi said is she understands that it's in his power to pray and to be granted a child for her. But she says, al titain li ela ben shel kayama. Don't give me except a child that will live. Now, Rashi knew the ending too, so he could phrase it that way. But, I mean, maybe she had a sense from what he said, you will be embracing a son. I'm just going to embrace a son? Is that all? There's something about the way Elisha is acting rather than, so that gives us a sense of what's at stake. Okay. Act 3. V'yigdal hayeled vayhi hayom v'yetzei el aviv el kotrim. The kid's growing up. He's big enough now to go down to the the fields. It's reaping time. V'yomer el aviv, he says to his father, Roshi, Roshi, my head hurts. I mean, it just says Roshi, Roshi. V'yomer el hana'ar, and so the father says to an attendant, Se'ehu el imo, carry him up to his mother. V'yisa'ehu, v'yivi'ehu, they carry him and they bring him el imo to his mother. V'yeshev al berkeha ad saharayim, and he sat in her lap until noon. V'yamot, and he dies. It pulls my heart every time I read this. V'ta'al v'tashkivehu al mitat isha elokim. She acts immediately. She takes him, she puts him on the bed, on Elisha's bed, v'tiskor ba'ado v'tetzeh, and she shuts the door behind him and she goes out. Somehow she knows exactly what to do. She doesn't waste any time. She springs into action. V'tikra el isha v'tomer, and she goes to her husband and she says, Shalchana li echad min ha'na'arim v'achad v'tonot ha'arutza el isha elokim v'ashuva. Give me an attendant and a donkey. I can hurry to the Ish Elokim, to the man of God, and I'll be back. I'm going to go. I'm going to hurry. I'll be right back. Yomer, and he says to her, Madua at halecha telav. Why are you going to him hayom today? Lo chodesh v'lo Shabbat. It's not Rosh Chodesh. It's not Shabbos. So now we learned that there was a practice of going to the Navi on Rosh Chodesh and Shabbos, and she did this regularly. But it's not Shabbos. It's not Rosh Chodesh. V'tomer shalom, and she says shalom. So there's a sense in which she can't speak the words of what happened, and she doesn't want to give it any finality. But there's also a sense, I think, of it's right now where it's half a story. And she doesn't want to, I can't tell you the story now because it's the wrong half. And it doesn't make sense until I finish the story. So what she's saying to him is, I'll tell you later. Trust me, I'll be back, and then I can tell you what's going on. And he trusts her, and he says, good, here. And it's reaping time. You need all your people and your donkeys, but his wife asks, so he gives her. And so they go. And she saddles the donkey, and she takes the attendant, the nahag v'lech, and she says to the attendant, nahag v'lech al ta'tzar li l'erkov ki im amarti lech. We're just going to go. Don't stop me for anything. No rest stops. Just unless I say anything, we're just going to go. The telech v'tavo el ish elokim. They go and they come to the ish elokim. So in two verbs, we have this several-hour journey, which you can only imagine was an anguished journey. And so they come El Har HaKarmel to where Elisha is. And Elisha sees her from afar. V'yomer El Gehazi, and he says to Gehazi, Na'aro, Hinei Shulamit, look, there's the Shulamite. Ata rutzna likrata. Oh, go, hurry, run to her, ve'amor la, and say to her, Hashalom lach, Hashalom li'ishech, Hashalom li'yeled. Say to her, is everything well with you, with your husband, and with your son? And v'tomer shalom. And she answers, so clearly the action happened, that we don't bother to mention that. V'tomer shalom. And she says, shalom. So she again says to Gehazi now, fine, everything's fine. Obviously it isn't, but it's, again, this unfinished story, but also she doesn't need to speak to Gehazi. But Tavo El Isha Elokim, El Har, and she comes to Elisha, Ish Elokim, to Techazek Baraglav, and she holds on to, she grasps his legs. This is the same word that we saw when they first encountered each other. Only then it was a verbal Techazek, when she was trying to get him to just come be a guest. But now she grabs his legs. This is a physical in her anguish. V'yigash Gehazi lahadfa. And Gehazi comes to push her away because that's his job. He's doing what an attendant for a Navi does. He's responsible for how people treat the Navi. V'yomer Ish Elohim, Isha Elohim says, Herpela, leave her. Ki nafsha mara la. Her soul is bitter within her. This is like Chana with Eli. V'Hashem hatli mimeni v'lo higidli. God has hidden it from me and not told me. This is the first mention of God's name in the whole story, which is really interesting. And Elisha admits right away his prophetic ignorance. And in strong terms, it's a double phrase. So you can read it as just emphatic, or you can read it as there's two pieces. It's not just that, so there are two pieces that God hid from him the information and didn't tell him directly. So his prophetic ability, which might have seen, God prevented that and also didn't tell him directly. So there's a sense in which God needed Elisha to not know so that he could, in order to set him up for this encounter with this woman. And Hashem blocked his ability to see. And so he's now recognizing his limitations. The other thing is, when Gehazi approached the woman and said, "How is your child?" it enabled her to know for sure that Elisha didn't know. So she knows before she meets him what he doesn't know. Okay, so she throws herself at his feet and she says, "V'tomer, Hasha'alti ben me'et Adoni? Did I ask for a son from my Lord?" And it's interesting that she says Adoni when she's always addressed him as Adoni Ish Elohim. Hello, Amarti lo tashlehoti. Didn't I say, don't deceive me? So this is not quite the same word she used before. This one has a slightly stronger. I don't know what's going on with the screen. I'm going to ignore it. All right, I'm going to ignore it.
Here we are.
All right.
Wow.
Anyway,
Okay.
she says, "Didn't I say lo tishlehoti?" And it a sense of don't mislead me, don't lead me to have a hope that's dashed. As the Midrash said, "Why did you give me a glass half full?" Or as Radak says, "Mali beni lo chaya," a son that didn't live. But I think the force here, she doesn't come to him to say, "Heal my son." That's not what she's asking. What she's asking for is, did I ask for you a son? Didn't I say I'm not asking for this? So she's coming to him with his own words. And what she's saying is, your responsibility is to your words. And that's what she's appealing to him with. And that's what he responds to. V'yomer leGehazi, so he immediately says to Gehazi, "Hagor matnecha v'kach mishanti b'yadcha," gird your loins, meaning act quickly, take my staff, v'lech, ki timsa ish lo tevarchenu, v'ki v'yavarecha ish lo te'anenu. If somebody meets you, don't greet him. If somebody greets you, don't respond. There's a whole Gemara on the fact that he does, but we're going to just bracket that because it's going to distract us. The Samta Mish Anti al Pnei Hanah, and put my staff on the face of the child. The Tomer Aim Hanah, and the mother of the boy says, Chai Hashem b'chei nafshecha, this is oath language. As Hashem lives, as you live, im ezveka, I will not leave you. This is the exact words that Elisha used to Eliyahu when Eliyahu was about to be carried off in the chariot to heaven, and they were traveling on the way. And Eliyahu was trying to get Elisha to leave him. And Elisha said this to Eliyahu 3 times, in fact. And he refused to leave him. And on the 3rd time, Eliyahu, the text said, V'yelchu shnehem, the 2 of them went together. And they went together to the point where Eliyahu said to Elisha, Ma eselach, what can I do for you? And Elisha asked from him for prophetic power, pishnayim, for a prophetic inheritance. And now the woman says the same thing back to him. He refused to leave his teacher, and now she's refusing to leave him, and it brings back in force to him his prophetic ability, his prophetic power that he received from his teacher. And that's what she's saying to him is at issue here. I will not leave him, she says, because you need to be the one to act. You sent Elisha with your staff, but you asked, Eliyahu asked of you, Ma'aselach, before you asked me what can be done for you. Ma'ala asot. But the direct question is more appropriate, and you need to be acting directly. This reviving my child can't be done by proxy with your attendant. And so when you sent Gehazi with your staff, it's you need to go. You need to come with me. And so he gets up and he goes after her, which is just so significant. All right, we'll finish up and be able to draw some conclusions. The Gehazi Gehazi had gone before him. He puts the staff on by the face of the boy. It mirrors the language that Elisha said. He does exactly what he's told. The aim kol, the aim keshev. There's no voice, no movement at all, no response. The Yashav likrato, so Gehazi comes out to meet them. The Yaged lo, and he reports. They more saying lo hekitza nahar. He hasn't woken up. Vayavo Elisha habaita. He comes into the house. V'hinei hanahar mate mishkavo mitato, and he sees the boy mate on his bed. Right, and the force of it must have been strong. Vayavo v'yiskor hadelet, and he goes in and he closes the door, as we saw that this is, he's performing the miracle. V'yiskor hadelet bi'ad shnehem, he closes the door on the 2 of them. V'yipalel el Hashem, and he prays. V'ya'al v'yishkav al hayeled v'yasam piv al piv, and he stretches out on he lies on the boy, mouth to mouth, einayim el einayim, eyes to eyes, kapav al kapav, palms to palm, v'yikhar alav, he stretches out on him, v'yicham basar hayeled, and the flesh of the boy begins to warm. And he gets up and he walks to and fro. So I think this gives us a sense of the what it costs Elisha to do this. This is a tremendous effort on his part. Eliyahu also revived the boy. But the emphasis in the description was very different. For Eliyahu, the description of the action was brief, but the prayer was there was a long description, and there were two repetition. There was a repetition of the prayer because the prayer was important for Eliyahu's development. But here for Elisha, yes, he prayed, that's important, but we need to see that he is acting, and we need to see what the action cost him. So he stretched himself on the boy, and it took energy from him, and he had to get up and walk around the room to revive himself, to continue the effort until he comes back. The Yahel, the Yachkor, I love, and he lies on him and he stretches himself over the boy. But he's Vayzorer Hanahar Ad Sheva Pa'amim, and the boy sneezes 7 times, 7 being, full nature. V'yifkach Hanahar et Einav, and he opens up his eyes. We can all breathe again. V'yikra el Gehazi, and so Elisha calls Gehazi, V'yomer, Kra el Hashunamit Hazot, call the Shunamit, V'yikra v'tavo, V'yikra el, he calls her and she comes, a love to him, V'yomer, Se'i b'nech, take up your son. V'tavo, v'tipol al raglav, she comes and she falls at his feet. So unlike before when she grabbed at his feet, she falls at his feet, V'tishtachu adza, and she picks up her son and she goes. So it's like now the relationships have been restored. She falls at his feet, she takes her son, and Gehazi calls. The relationship from the very beginning has been restored because now everything has been restored to the way it ought to be. Because now we understand the role of Gehazi as the minor character, and the action couldn't have happened without Gehazi because it shows for us what Elisha's been doing. He's been relying on Gehazi rather than on himself, and the action here is through this returning Elisha to his proper self, so to speak. He became reliant on Gehazi, and Gehazi's amazing faith in him, which made Elisha distant. The way Alex Israel put it is there's a danger of religious leaders becoming religious institutions. He quotes Rav Medan in something called the prophetic court, that the people came to seek the Navi, they need contact, it becomes busy, the Navi eventually has to delegate, you develop a bureaucracy, and that bureaucracy has the potential for destroying his work. And so when she approaches in distress, she doesn't need the office of the prophet, she needs the prophet. And when he delegates Gehazi with his staff, it's metaphoric. I don't need the staff, I need you. And I need you to remember who you are. And the language is so crucial at every point. When he says ma lasot, as opposed to what he said in the first story, ma e'esela, what can I do for you? He has to involve himself. Even if it means using the people around him, he still has to involve himself. So she returns him to the strengths he had. She's a corrective for him. She allows him to be, again, the Ish Elokim Kadoshu that she called him at the beginning, and that she saw in him. She allows him to be his true self. So when she bows at the end, she's restored him to his previous status and her to hers, which is a woman with some humility who can respond with humility to him, because it's like her work is done here. And in fact, the stories that follow this are again stories of Elisha acting in community with an understanding of what each group needs and responding to them. So we see a balance of humility as a human being and of the Navi as a bearer of God's word. So it's, and they're, the two stories together are wonderful pairs. I think it's for me, it's a really good example of many of the stories that we've seen in Nevi'im Rishonim of wonderful literary units, and how not just that they're wonderful stories, but the more you pay attention to the literary devices and the details, the richer the stories become. So that's what I got.
Thank you.
So this was our last class, because next week is Erev Yom Tov.
It's true.
Well,
Are you gonna